In ancient Egypt, a precious mineral referred to in many temples and steles was used by the priests and pharaohs in many of their rituals. The powder was made by the priests and used to make ceremonial bread cakes for the pharaohs, so that they might live longer and be closer to God. Centuries later, in 1904, British archaeologist Sir Flinders Petrie stumbled across a hidden temple on Mount Serebit in the middle of the Sinai Desert. Inside the temple, he found huge quantities of an unknown white powder that resembled ash, yet strangely, he found no evidence of the fires.
This is a portion of an old Egyptian temple. There's an interesting story behind this temple. The anniversary of its discovery, the 100th anniversary, is next year. It was discovered in 1904, but it was not discovered in Egypt. Back in 1904, the Egyptologist Sir Flinders Petrie, British archaeologist, went on an expedition into the land of Sinai to map the country for the Egypt Exploration Fund. And that was the land apparently where Moses had taken the Israelites and they'd crossed this land of Sinai to get from Egypt into the Promised Land. And en route there, they'd stopped at this amazing mountain. And this was the mountain where Moses saw the burning bush. It was where he received the Ten Commandments and the Book of the Law. It was where he seemingly spoke with God and where they built the Ark of the Covenant. And this whole story is full of accounts of fires and all sorts of amazing magical things going on. Anyway, they decided to climb this mountain. They climbed it. 2,500 feet above ground level, they found a great plateau with this temple. An Egyptian temple in the middle of nowhere. 270 feet of it on this plateau. Another equal amount of it back inside a cave that was carved into the mountain. This thing was very important. At the time, they didn't know what they were looking for, they didn't know what they'd found, but they found a secreted hoard of pure, unadulterated white powder, which they said they winnowed and they sieved and they tested. There was nothing there, no residue of anything, just this amazing powder, which he said would disappear into your fingerprints. It was so fine. It seemed to have been an operative workshop, he said, more of a place of work than worship. The whole thing was dedicated, it seems, to mufkut and the production of mufkut. Every pharaoh from the 4th dynasty to the 19th dynasty was portrayed there. Every pharaoh had stated things that were written on tablets in this mountain. So these wall reliefs depict, going through the pharaohs of numerous dynasties, strange presentations. This is an example of one. This is drawn up by the Egypt Exploration Fund, this particular one from a relief. This is Pharaoh Amenhotep III. This is an 18th dynasty pharaoh. And the caption, these are all captioned in hieroglyphs. It says, Shebek Hotep brings the noble and precious stone to his majesty. He is the guardian who brings the bread because he is the great one over the house of gold. So we have this, and we have this fellow here called Shebek Hotep, a treasurer fellow who's holding in the middle of the picture this cone-shaped object. So the association is there, and there are numerous of these. And once that had been discovered in this Sinai temple, the moment Egyptologists went back into Egypt and began to look, they've kept finding these. Mufkut, cones, bread, light. It was about bread. It was about something the kings ingested. They were eating this material that was formed into little cakes, but it was a powder. The Old Testament book of Exodus gives us a really good example of this in operation. It took the longest time before anybody even thought to ask a question about this little bit of the story in Exodus. Many of you will know the story. Moses had been up the mountain. He'd come down with the Ten Commandments, and then he broke the tablets because he got terribly angry to see that his brother Aaron had collected all the gold earrings from the Israelites and melted them down and made a golden calf as an idol of worship. And he said, well, that may be the way we used to do things. We don't do that anymore. We have this new culture here that we're part of, and I've just spoken to the Lord of this culture, and we don't worship graven images anymore. And he got very angry. And then it says this, that he took the golden calf, he burnt it with fire, he transposed it with powder, mixed that with water, and fed it to the Israelites. Interesting little story. He took the gold, burnt it with fire, and transposed it into powder. That doesn't work. You heat gold with fire or burn gold with fire, you get molten gold. You don't get powder. Interesting little story. He took the gold, burnt it with fire, and transposed it into powder. That doesn't work. You heat gold with fire or burn gold with fire, you get molten gold. You don't get powder. Nobody, it seems, thought to ask the question. They use this, it says, to make bread. They could mix it with frankincense, the Bible tells us, and mold little bread cakes, which the most ancient Bible text that we have, the Septuagint, the old Greek Bible, calls bread of the presence, presumably bread of the presence of God or of something important. Shemana means firestone. This is a relief from that temple, another relief showing a bread presentation again. It was always linked with bread. They were always little conical shapes. We know that from about 2,500 BC, the pharaohs in Egypt, or the kings before they became pharaohs in Greek times, were ingesting the bread cakes of this white powder substance. Only the metallurgical adepts knew the secret of its manufacture. Metallurgical adepts, yep, it's made from metal, that makes sense. The high priest of the temples had a very strange title. The high priests of the Egyptian temples were called the great artificers. Well, a great artificer is a worker in materials, particularly metals. So that was sort of interesting. It's beginning to link together, and thinking back to Petrie's concept, yeah, these were places of worship, not worship. Temples were not the same as churches, but evolved from the concept. I actually looked in just the English language word etymological dictionary from Oxford University. It traces the origin of words, and lo and behold, I only had to go back 700 years to discover that the word we now use as worship had a K in the middle of it. It was worship. They used to work for the gods. They didn't used to worship the gods. They used to work for the gods, whoever the gods were. It was said that this was the food of the light body. They said we all have bodies, but we don't just have physical bodies, we have light bodies. And just as we feed our physical bodies, they said, we have to feed our light bodies so that they will be nurtured and grow in the same way. They have to be as fulfilled as the physical body. And they call the light body the car. Well, it's interesting because scientists in recent times have actually called this material the light of life, because it resonates with DNA on the same frequencies. It's a light wave. We find lots of references to mufkat. This relief here, this picture, this drawing was actually done by the Russian scholar Emanuel Velikovsky, and he drew this up simply to give us an image of this relief at Karnak, at the Temple of Karnak. This shows the treasures of the Pharaoh Thutmose the third. Mufkat in Egyptian law was always portrayed as a cone shape. Now these things sit there in the gold section, and it says underneath, these are gold, but we call them bread. 1450 BC, roughly, Thutmose founded at this temple at Karnak a college, an institute at the temple of scholarly, priestly types who were called the Great White Brotherhood. The Alexandrians wrote of them and said they were called the Great White Brotherhood because they were absolutely obsessed with a mysterious white powder. And they made some interesting comments. They said that they call it the Paradise Stone, and it has unique qualities inasmuch as that it can weigh far more than its own original quantity of gold. But even a feather can tip the scales against it. So it can be a lot heavier than the gold it came from, or it can be lighter than a feather. This stuff has the ability to change its weight very, very dramatically. It's always, in the old text, associated with light, with enlightenment, with illumination of some sort. It's a light illumination that seems to have to do with the acquisition of knowledge and wisdom, that sort of illumination and enlightenment. It called these powders, which were associated gold in Mesopotamia, they were called shamana. In Egypt, they were called mufkut. So they had all these strange names. The Alexandrians called it the paradise stone. It's not a stone, it's a powder, but they called it the paradise stone. And in all cases, whether it was shamana, mufkut, paradise stone, or whatever, they all said this is a mysterious powder of projection. A powder of projection, and the various cultures were unanimous on that particular description. They said it has powers of levitation, powers of transmutation, of teleportation. It seemed to be a vehicle by which they would communicate with gods. It was something to do with the afterlife of the Egyptian pharaohs. And they also said it was a key to active longevity. Because of this, people were able to live a long time, particularly those whose life it was part of, the high priests, the kings, the pharaohs. The Egyptian pyramid texts, they talk about the material. It's called mufkut. The pyramid texts come from the 5th dynasty tomb at Saqqara of King Unas. Here is described something called the field of mufkuts, and this is interesting because this moves into modern science again, the field of mufkuts. The stories of this field turn up earlier than the 5th dynasty. They turn up in the 4th dynasty, they turn up in the 3rd and the 2nd, and it's very interesting.
The bread of life, made from the white powder of gold. The Egyptians called the powder mufkut, but they knew it was no ordinary mineral. Mufkut means what is it? But literally translated, the hieroglyph reads spirit, fire, stone, part magic, part precious mineral. Manna in Hebrew is also translated as what is it? Manna.
It talks about in the Papyrus of Ani all these properties and characteristics that will come to be possessed by the people when they die and come before God. It's talking about being perfected, walking there with the angels or the light beings, and it says, what then is it? And it goes on, does some more describing. It says, what then is it? Next page. You know, describe some more, what then is it? 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 You say, God, these guys are totally preoccupied with this what then is it, aren't they? Nobody who read that previous to my bringing it to their attention ever questioned this. It was just what they said. I said, but you know, somebody writing this, they got this real hang up about this what then is it? Right? Anyway, I'm just giving you some examples. It's a great big book, you know, the Papyrus of Ani. It's what then is it? When you go to the complete works of Josephus, next page, and it gives you the definition of the what then is it. The word mana literally means, it translates literally to a question, what is it? That's what the word mana means. What is it? So this mysterious white substance that were being given to the Hebrews when they were out on the desert, just coincidentally we were calling it the very same thing that they were calling it in Egypt 3500 BC. It's what is it? Or what then is it? You know, I just love this hieroglyph because this is the whole story. This is the whole story in a nutshell. It's a jackal Anubis, which is the black jackal, which symbolically represented the digestive system. Because, you know, a dog goes and gets something, he goes out and digs a hole and buries it, and lets it rot and ferment, and then he comes back, digs it up, and chews on and eats it. So Anubis represents the digestive system. Here is the king offers the jackal, Anubis, the digestive system, the white bread. Okay, the white nourishment, the white bread. Okay, that tells you the whole story right there. That is the Egyptian rite of passage, coming with the white bread to offer it to the digestive system. To me, that one hieroglyph says everything. Remember that the Hebrews in the first temple, they had the Ark of the Covenant. They carried it on poles, and in it they had the Ten Commandments and the pot of the manna, or the what then is it. This is a listing of all the things that were supposedly taken from the first temple of Jerusalem. And right up there, I've colored the cones. You know, I don't even notice here, it has all of the things they took, and it shows what they are. And you can see the Torahs and the tables up here, and the offertory tables, the pots, everything. But here in these elongated cones, it says this one is silver, the white powder is silver, but all these others are the white powder of gold. And they're actually depicted as a elongated triangle-shaped cone. Anyway, these are the things that were taken from the first temple, and there was white powder of gold taken. What is it? All right. And this is it was at the bottom here, and this says code 138 on the left bears the superscription white bread, but was made of silver. So this is unique in that up here that says it was white bread, but it was actually silver. In Exodus, we learned that goldsmiths, not bakers, made the showbread. So it wasn't bakers that made the showbread, and it really wasn't called showbread in the first temple. It was called the bread of the presence of God. Okay, not showbread. It was when they built the second temple and the third temple that they started making showbread, not the bread of the presence of God. All right. It's referred to as the manna, food of the gods, food of the spirit, bread of the presence, semen of the Father in heaven, the golden tear from the eye of Horus, or that which issues the mouth of the Creator. The Egyptian people were very literal people. They were trying to describe this material so that you would understand what it looked like. The white powder is so insoluble, if it's taken into your body, it will literally not dissolve in the hydrochloric acid of the stomach. You have to take the white powder and literally hydrolyze it so it looks like a white snotty material. Okay, it's a hydroxide. That white snotty material then will instantly dissolve in hydrochloric acid when it goes to the stomach and be assimilated in through the digestive system, go into the body and move all throughout your body. Okay? And so it was referred to by the Egyptians as the semen of the Father in heaven. And in the Egyptian rite of passage, you literally took into your body the semen of the Father in heaven. You were born again as a son of God, not a son of man, and you now were thought of as a god, not a regular man. And the Pharaoh was considered a god, and they looked upon him as a god, but he had gone through the Egyptian rite of passage. All right. You've seen the golden tear from the Eye of Horus. You've seen it depicted. In the corner, there's a golden tear hanging in that eye with the eyelash on it, and the golden tear hanging over in the corner. That which issues the mouth of Creator, the spittle. It talks about it being the semen of the Father in heaven. These are all ways of describing to you what it looks like. This hydrated oxide of gold looks like semen, okay? And they were literal people. So they weren't trying to be crude. They were just trying to let you understand what it literally looks like. The whole idea of someone claiming to be born again as a son of God, you know, in the Melchizedek priesthood, in the Melchizedek priest, once a week would bring them on and set it into offering bowls on the golden table behind the veil of Holy of Holies. And once a week they'd come, and anything that wasn't gone they would take and ingest themselves. Then they set more out for the next week. And this is what they did in the first temple. This material, when we analyze using thermogravimetric analysis on the iridium, rhodium, platinum, palladium, gold, and silver, what we find is all of them superconduct, but most of them are 200, 300, 400 degrees centigrade. Gold is the only one that superconducts at room temperature. Gold will literally superconduct at body temperature. Gold is the only one that superconducts at room temperature. Gold will literally superconduct at body temperature.